Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty unique story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. Get cozy and watch till the end, guys.
There are moments in the vast darkness of the 41st millennium when two forces collide with such spectacular violence that the very fabric of reality seems to pause and take notice. Picture, if you will, a battlefield where gold meets green, where the most refined warriors humanity has ever produced stand against the most numerous and relentless tide of savage Xenos the galaxy has ever known. This is not merely a battle. This is a study in contrast so extreme, a clash of philosophies so absolute, that to witness it would be to understand something fundamental about the nature of war itself. On one side stand the Adeptus Custodes, the 10,000, the Emperor's own chosen guardians. Each one is a masterwork of genetic engineering and martial perfection, and a warrior who stands to a space marine as a space marine stands to a mortal man. They are clad in auramite armor that gleams like captured sunlight, wielding weapons that have drunk the blood of demons and traitors for 10,000 years. They move with a grace that defies their massive frames, each gesture precise, each strike calculated with mathematical perfection. These are not soldiers. These are artists of death, philosophers of war, each one a legend unto himself. On the other side surges the green tide, orcs, greenskins, the most successful species in the entire galaxy, possibly outnumbering even humanity itself. They come not in squads but in hordes, not in formations but in mobs. Where the custodians are golden precision, the orcs are verdant chaos. They bellow and roar, their crude weapons held high. Their tusked faces split in savage grins. They are creatures of pure aggression, engineered by ancient gods for one purpose and one purpose alone: to fight, to kill, to conquer. And they do so with a joy that is almost infectious, a brutal enthusiasm that makes every battle a celebration of violence. When these two forces meet, something extraordinary happens, something that challenges our understanding of warfare, of tactics, of what it means to prevail against impossible odds. Because make no mistake, both sides face impossible odds in this encounter. The custodians face an enemy that can drown them in sheer weight of numbers, that can sacrifice 1,000 warriors to bring down a single golden guardian and consider it a fair trade. The orcs face warriors who can, and have, slaughtered tens of thousands of their kind without breaking stride, whose every blow is death, whose every movement is poetry written in the blood of their enemies. This is the story of what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. This is the tale of the Golden Legion against the Green Tide. This is what happens when the Emperor's finest face an entire orc army. The Golden Legion, paragons beyond mortal comprehension. To understand what makes a custodian so devastating on the battlefield, we must first understand what they are. Not what they appear to be, mind you, for appearance can be deceiving. No, we must understand what they truly are, down to the cellular level, down to the very essence of their being. And that understanding begins not in the present, but in the distant past. In the age when the Emperor of mankind still walked openly among his people. During the unification wars on Terra, when the Emperor sought to bring all of Earth's scattered kingdoms and warlords under his dominion, he created warriors. Not the Space Marines, though they would come later. Not the Thunder Warriors, though they came before. No, he created something else entirely, something that would serve a different purpose. While the Thunder Warriors were weapons of conquest, brutal and overwhelming, the Custodians were something more refined. They were protectors, yes, but they were also companions, advisors, scholars, and artists. Each custodian was crafted individually, their genetic enhancement tailored specifically to their physiology, their psychology, their very soul. The process of creating a custodian is not the mass production that creates Space Marines. It is not the crude genetic manipulation that forged the Thunder Warriors. It is alchemy of the highest order, a process that takes the raw material of a human infant, usually selected from Terra's noble families, and transforms them into something that transcends humanity without losing what makes humanity great. The Emperor himself oversees each transformation, his divine hand guiding the alchemical processes that will reshape flesh and bone, that will rewrite the very genetic code of the aspirant. Where a space marine has 19 gene seed organs implanted into their body, a custodian undergoes something far more comprehensive. Their entire being is rewritten at the cellular level. Their bones become denser, harder, reinforced with mineral deposits that make them nearly unbreakable. Their muscles develop with a perfection that defies natural law, each fiber optimized for strength, speed, and endurance. Their nervous system is enhanced to transmit signals at speeds that allow them to react to threats before conscious thought can even register them. Their hearts, yes, they have more than one, beat with a rhythm that can be consciously controlled, allowing them to regulate their metabolism, their oxygen consumption, their adrenaline production, with the precision of a master musician tuning an instrument. But it is not just their physical transformation that sets them apart. A space marine is indoctrinated into his chapter's beliefs, his thoughts shaped by hypnotic conditioning and psychological programming. A custodian receives no such indoctrination. Instead, they are educated. They study warfare, yes, but they also study philosophy, art, history, poetry, music. They learn not just how to kill, but why to kill, when to kill, and perhaps most importantly, when not to kill. Each custodian is encouraged to develop their own personality, their own interests, their own perspective on the world. This is not a flaw in their design. It is the entire point. You see, the custodians were never meant to be soldiers in the traditional sense. Soldiers follow orders without question, execute plans without deviation, function as cogs in a larger military machine. The custodians are something else entirely. Each one is a warrior philosopher, capable of independent thought and action, capable of assessing a situation and determining the best course of action without needing direction from above. This is why they fight as individuals rather than as squads. This is why each one wears armor custom crafted to their specific physiology, why each one wields weapons chosen to complement their particular fighting style. And what a fighting style it is. Where a space marine is trained in the brutal efficiency of squad-based combat, a custodian is trained in martial forms that would take centuries for a mortal to master. They learn what are called martial katas, combat stances and techniques that have been refined over 10,000 years of constant warfare. There is the Callistus stance, where they advance while maintaining a withering barrage of fire, their guardian spears blazing with bolt rounds even as they close for melee combat. There is the Dakatarai stance, an aggressive imperial fighting style adapted specifically for the custodians, designed to blend multiple opponents in moments. There is the Rendak stance, emphasizing iron defense, turning each custodian into an immovable bulwark against which enemy attacks shatter like waves against stone. But these stances are not rigid forms that must be followed without deviation. No, they are frameworks, foundations upon which each custodian builds their own personal style. A custodian might begin a combat in one stance, shift to another mid-battle as the situation demands, then blend elements of multiple stances in ways that would seem impossible to lesser warriors. They can do this because their minds work at speeds that dwarf even the enhanced cognition of a space marine. They can process dozens of potential actions in the span of a heartbeat, while selecting the optimal response to any given threat with computer-like precision. Their equipment reflects this philosophy of individual excellence. A custodian's armor is not mass-produced ceramite like that of a space marine. It is auramite, a material that is both lighter and stronger than ceramite, that can withstand punishment that would shatter lesser armor. Each suit is crafted by master artificers over the course of months, even years, fitted specifically to its intended wearer. The armor is adorned with precious gems harvested from deep within Terra itself, cut by skilled artisans to catch and reflect light in ways that make the custodian seem to glow with an inner radiance. This is not mere vanity. This is psychological warfare of the highest order. An enemy sees a custodian approaching and understands immediately that they face something beyond mortal ken, something that exists on a different plane of existence. Their weapons are equally impressive. The Guardian Spear, the most iconic weapon of the Custodian Guard, is a marvel of technological achievement. It is both a power weapon, capable of cleaving through armor and flesh with equal ease, and a bolter, firing bolt rounds from the haft that can punch through tank armor. A custodian wielding a Guardian Spear can engage enemies at range, switching seamlessly to melee combat as the situation demands. The Sentinel Blade, paired with a Praesidium shield, offers a more defensive approach, allowing a custodian to hold a position against overwhelming numbers. The Misericordia, a power dagger worn by all custodians, and serves as both a tool and a last resort weapon, its blade capable of piercing even the thickest armor. And then there are the individuals who stand above even these paragons, shield captains, who lead custodian strike forces with tactical acumen that would shame most chapter masters. Blade champions, duelists of such skill that they can choose from multiple fighting styles mid-combat, adapting to their opponent's tactics in real time. Alaris Terminators, clad in Alaris Terminator armor that makes them even more durable than their already nigh invulnerable brothers, capable of teleporting directly into the heart of enemy formations. And above them all, Trajan Valoris, the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, whose mastery of warfare is such that he can alter the flow of time itself with the moment shackle, and a relic from the dark age of technology. But for all their individual power, for all their skill and equipment, the custodians face a fundamental challenge when confronting an enemy like the Orcs. They are few. There are only 10,000 custodians in the entire galaxy, and most of them remain on Terra, guarding the Imperial Palace and the Golden Throne. Those who venture beyond the throne world do so in small numbers, strike forces of perhaps 100 warriors at most, often far fewer. They are used to being outnumbered. They expect it. They plan for it. But there is a difference between being outnumbered and facing the kind of overwhelming numerical superiority that an Orc army represents. And that brings us to their opposite number, and to the force that has challenged and threatened the Imperium since before the Imperium itself existed. That brings us to the Orcs, the Green Tide, savagery perfected. If the Custodians represent the pinnacle of human achievement, the absolute best that humanity can produce through science and dedication, then the Orcs represent something else entirely. They represent evolution as a weapon. They represent biology as warfare. They are, in every sense of the word, perfect organisms, designed by ancient gods for a single purpose: to fight and to survive and to multiply. To understand the Orcs, we must first understand their origins. Long before humanity took its first steps toward the stars, before the Eldar fell into decadence and birthed Slaanesh, before the Necrons slumbered in their tomb worlds, there was a war. It was called the War in Heaven, and it pitted the Old Ones, ancient beings of immense psychic power, against the Necrontyr and their Khitan masters. The Old Ones were losing. They needed warriors, soldiers who could fight the deathless legions of the Necrons and the reality-bending powers of the Satan. So they created the Krork, the ancient predecessors of modern Orcs. The Krork were biological weapons of terrifying sophistication. They combined the resilience and rapid reproduction of fungus with the aggression and physical power of apex predators. They could survive in any environment, thrive on any world, multiply from the spores they released with every breath, and especially upon death. They were designed to be self-sufficient, requiring minimal resources, capable of photosynthesizing energy from sunlight to supplement their diet. They were designed to be adaptable, with genetic memory that allowed them to produce specialists, mechs who understood technology, Pain boys who could perform crude but effective surgery. Weird boys who could channel the psychic field generated by other orcs. But most importantly, they were designed to never stop fighting. The Krork were hardwired at a genetic level to seek out conflict, to revel in violence, to grow stronger with each battle. And they had a unique advantage. They grew larger and more powerful the more they fought. An orc who survived many battles would become physically bigger, stronger, tougher. The most successful warriors would eventually become war bosses, towering brutes who commanded through pure physical dominance. The war in heaven ended. The old ones vanished or died. The Satan were shattered. The Necrons went to sleep, and the Krork remained. Over millions of years, they devolved. They lost some of the sophistication that their creators had given them. They became the orcs we know today, cruder, more savage, less intelligent than their ancient predecessors. But they retained the core features that made them such effective warriors. They retained their biological perfection, their rapid reproduction, their love of battle. And they spread across the galaxy like a plague. An orc's physiology is a study in brutal efficiency. They stand roughly as tall as a human when hunched over, which is their natural posture, though they would be significantly taller if they stood upright. Their skin is green, containing chlorophyll that allows them to photosynthesize, giving them a tremendous advantage in supply logistics. Yet they can survive on minimal food, drawing energy from sunlight itself. Their blood is green as well, filled with fungal organisms and with a high chlorophyll content. This strange biology makes them incredibly resilient. An orc can survive wounds that would kill a human or even a space marine. Their internal structure is simplified compared to humans. They lack organs like kidneys, liver, spleen, and pancreas. Instead, they have what Imperial Magos biologists call a fungal soup filling their body cavity, performing the functions of these organs, but in a much more resilient manner. Their bones are thick and hard, reinforced with fungal matter that makes them incredibly difficult to break. Their skull can be 2 inches thick, providing protection that would shame most armor. They have a simple but effective digestive system, a multi-chambered stomach that can process almost anything organic. But perhaps the most remarkable feature of orc biology is their reproductive system, or rather, their lack of one. Orcs don't reproduce sexually. They reproduce via spores. An orc releases these spores constantly throughout its life, but especially when it dies. These spores can survive for decades, centuries even, lying dormant until conditions are right for germination. When they do germinate, they grow into various orcoid life forms, Gretchen, snotlings, squigs, and eventually orcs themselves. This means that once an orc infestation takes hold on a world, it is nearly impossible to eradicate completely. Even if you kill every visible orc, the spores they released will eventually grow into a new generation. But this reproductive strategy gives the orcs an overwhelming numerical advantage. Where the Imperium must raise and train soldiers, where the Eldar must carefully nurture each new generation, where even the Tyranids must consume biomass to create new organisms, the orcs simply need to die. Every battle, win or lose, spreads more spores. Every orc killed is a future warband waiting to emerge from the wilderness. It's a strategy of such elegant simplicity that it borders on genius. And yet, for all their crude appearance, for all their seeming stupidity, the orcs possess a form of intelligence uniquely suited to warfare. They have genetic memory, knowledge hardwired into their DNA that activates when needed. A mech, an orc specializing in technology, doesn't learn how to build machines. He simply knows. A pain boy doesn't study medicine. He just understands how to put an orc back together. This genetic memory is passed down through the spores, ensuring that even a tribe of feral orcs, isolated for centuries, will eventually produce the specialists they need. But the orcs' greatest weapon isn't their physical resilience, or their numbers, or their genetic memory. It's their collective psychic field, what they call the force of battle. When orcs gather in large numbers, especially when led by a powerful war boss, they generate a psychic field that literally warps reality. This field has tangible effects. It makes their ramshackle technology work when by all rights it shouldn't. It makes red vehicles go faster because orcs believe red ones are faster. It makes their weapons more powerful when fired in large volleys because the orcs believe more dakka is better. This is not metaphorical. This is literal. Orc belief shapes reality in ways that would make a chaos sorcerer envious. This psychic field also affects orcs themselves. The more orcs gather, the more powerful the field becomes, and the more powerful the orcs become. A single orc is dangerous, tough, and aggressive. A mob of 10 orcs is formidable, fearless, and relentless. But an army of 10,000 orcs, a true expression of their battle force, becomes something terrifying. They become faster, stronger, harder to kill. Their crude weapons strike with greater force. Their already impressive resilience becomes nearly supernatural, and they feel no fear, no hesitation, only the pure joy of combat. This joy is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of orc psychology from an imperial perspective. They don't fight because they must. They don't fight because they're forced to. They fight because they love it. Combat is their religion, their art, their entertainment, their reason for existing. An orc in battle is an orc at their happiest. This makes them unpredictable and dangerous in ways that more disciplined armies are not. They will charge into certain death with grins on their faces. They will fight on with mortal wounds that would send other races into shock. They will laugh as they die, satisfied that they went out fighting. Orc society, such as it is, revolves around this love of combat. The biggest, strongest orcs become knobs, elites who boss around the regular boys. The biggest and strongest knobs become war bosses, taking command of entire tribes or even multiple tribes. A war boss doesn't maintain his position through political cunning or inherited authority, but he maintains it by being the biggest, meanest orc around. Challenge him and prove you're bigger and meaner, and you become the new boss. This creates a brutal meritocracy where only the strong survive and the strongest lead. When a particularly powerful war boss emerges, one with both size and a degree of cunning, they can unite multiple orc tribes under their banner. This creates momentum, drawing more orcs to the cause. The psychic field grows stronger. The battles grow larger. Eventually, this can snowball into what the orcs call a great campaign, a massive migration of orcs across the stars, conquering worlds and seeking ever greater fights. These campaigns have brought the Imperium to its knees more than once. The War of the Beast, led by a war boss simply known as the Beast, nearly destroyed Terra itself. Kazkul Thraka, the most powerful war boss in the current era, has led multiple great campaigns that have devastated entire sectors. The orcs' weapons and equipment reflect their crude but effective philosophy. They don't design weapons. They build them from scrap and intuition and belief. A typical orc chopper, a crude bladed weapon, would seem like it couldn't cut through armor, but wielded by an orc and backed by the psychic field, it strikes with tremendous force. An orc shooter, a gun that looks like it was assembled from trash, wouldn't seem like it should work, but it spits out a storm of bullets nonetheless. Orc vehicles, ramshackle constructions that would never pass any safety inspection, nonetheless roar across battlefields at breakneck speeds, held together by the orcs' absolute belief that they will work. Some orc weapons are more sophisticated. The power claw, a massive hydraulic claw that can crush tank armor. The rocket launcher, which fires explosive rockets with surprising accuracy, considering the orc, wielding it, can barely aim. The mega blaster, an energy weapon of terrifying power, but equally terrifying instability, prone to exploding and taking the wielder with it. But even these weapons are crude compared to Imperial technology, held together by the psychic field and the mech's intuitive understanding of technology. Orc tactics, if they can be called tactics, revolve around overwhelming the enemy with sheer aggression. They advance in a great green tide, bellowing and firing wildly. They don't maintain neat formations. They don't execute complex maneuvers. They simply charge forward and attack whatever is in front of them. As this seems chaotic from an outside perspective, and it is, But there's a brutal logic to it. Orcs are tough enough to weather enemy fire during their advance. Their numbers are great enough that even heavy casualties don't stop their momentum. And once they reach melee range, their physical strength and ferocity give them a tremendous advantage. But orcs are not entirely without cunning. Certain clans specialize in different approaches to warfare. The Bad Moons, wealthier than other orcs due to their faster-growing teeth, which serve as currency, field more and better guns. The Evil Suns obsess over speed, painting everything red and racing toward the enemy on bikes and in trucks. The Goths are the most aggressive, favoring close combat above all else. The Blood Axes, considered oddly cunning by other orcs, to actually employ tactics like ambushes and retreats. The Death Skulls are looters and scavengers, taking whatever they can from the battlefield and using it against their enemies. This diversity in orc culture, as they call it, means that an orc army can actually present a varied threat. Some battles will feature hordes of boys charging on foot, a green tide of muscle and blades. Others might see speed freaks racing across the battlefield on warbikes and in vehicles, hitting fast and hard. Some might feature dread mobs, walker-heavy forces with killer cans and deaf dreads providing heavy firepower. And some might even feature genuine tactics, with blood axes using camouflage and strategy that would make an Imperial Guard commander nod in approval before they crushed him with a power claw. The question then becomes this: what happens when these two forces, the Golden Legion and the Green Tide, actually meet on the battlefield? What happens when the most elite warriors humanity can face an enemy that can outnumber them 1,000 to 1, that will never stop fighting, that actually grows stronger the longer the battle rages? What happens when quality faces quantity in its most extreme form? The mathematics of death. Historical precedent. History, they say, is written by the victors. But sometimes history speaks with such clarity that even the defeated must acknowledge the truth of what occurred. Such is the case with the Battle of Gyros Thravian, perhaps the most famous engagement between Custodians and Orcs, a battle that has been studied by Imperial strategists for millennia. It's a battle that tells us exactly what happens when the Emperor's finest face, the Green Tide. The battle took place during the Great Crusade, in the last century of the 30th millennium. The enemy was an orc warlord named Garkul Blackfang, a creature of such tremendous size and power that he was considered one of the most dangerous orc leaders ever encountered. His horde was vast beyond reckoning, a green tide that had swept across multiple systems, consuming worlds and growing larger with each conquest. The Imperium responded with overwhelming force. 3 full Space Marine legions were deployed: the Lunar Wolves, the Death Guard, and the Imperial Fists. Tens of thousands of the Emperor's Astartes arrayed against the green-skin menace. And they were losing. Let that sink in for a moment. 3 entire Space Marine legions, of forces that had conquered countless worlds, that had brought the light of the Imperium to the darkest corners of the galaxy, were on the verge of defeat against an orc horde. This was not due to any failure on the part of the Astartes. They fought with their characteristic courage and skill, but they were simply overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the orc forces. For every orc they killed, 10 more seemed to take its place. For every position they held, the orcs would simply flow around it like a green tide, threatening to engulf them from all sides. This was when the Emperor himself intervened. Aboard his flagship, the Bucephalus, he observed the battle unfolding below and made a decision. He would not send reinforcements in the traditional sense. He would not deploy more legions, more tanks, more artillery. Instead, he would deploy a single force, small in number but unmatched in quality. He would deploy the Legio Custodes. 1,000 Custodians descended from orbit, the Emperor himself at their head. They struck at the heart of the orc horde like a golden spear, their guardian spears blazing, their movements a deadly dance of perfect violence. The Emperor confronted Garkul Blackfang atop the warlord's massive gargant, a titanic war machine that towered over the battlefield. The duel was brief. The Emperor struck down the warlord, and with their leader dead, the Orc horde faltered. But the Custodians did not falter. They pressed their advantage, cutting through the disorganized Orcs like a blade through flesh. They fought for hours, each Custodian a whirlwind of destruction, their weapons never still, their advance never stopping. When the battle finally ended, when the last Orc fled or died, the count began. And the numbers were staggering. The Custodians had slain over 100,000 Orcs. Let me repeat that for emphasis. 1,000 Custodians killed more than 100,000 Orcs. That is an average of 100 Orc kills per Custodian. And the cost? 3 Custodians had fallen. 3 out of 1,000. The Emperor was so moved by their sacrifice that he personally engraved their names into his armor, an honor beyond price. This battle tells us several crucial things about what happens when Custodians face Orcs. First, it tells us that even overwhelming numerical superiority is not enough to guarantee Orc victory. The Custodians' skill and equipment allow them to kill enemies at a rate that defies belief. And each Custodian is worth not 10, not 50, but potentially hundreds of Orcs in combat. This is not hyperbole. This is documented fact. Second, it tells us that Custodians can endure sustained combat against superior numbers without breaking. For hours they fought surrounded by enemies, never once giving ground they didn't choose to give. Their physical stamina, their enhanced physiology, allows them to fight far longer than even Space Marines. Where an Astartes might tire after hours of continuous combat, a Custodian can fight for days if necessary. Third, it tells us that Custodians rarely die. Not never, 3 fell at Gyros Thravian after all, but rarely. Their armor, their skill, their enhanced reflexes, all combine to make them incredibly difficult to kill. An Orc needs to land a lucky blow, or a particularly powerful war boss needs to engage them directly for a Custodian to fall. And even then, the Custodian will often take dozens or even hundreds of Orcs with them before they go down. But we must be careful not to extrapolate too far from a single battle, even one as well documented as Gyros Thravian. That battle had certain factors that worked in the Custodians' favor. They had the Emperor himself leading them, his presence undoubtedly inspiring them to greater heights. They struck at a crucial moment, just as the Orc leadership was eliminated, creating confusion in the Orc ranks. And they had the support of 3 Space Marine legions, who, while they were not winning before the Custodians arrived, certainly absorbed a significant portion of the Orc horde's attention and strength. So let us consider other examples. During the War of the Beast, centuries later, when an Orc warlord known simply as the Beast nearly conquered Terra itself, the Custodians played a crucial role in the defense. They held the walls of the Imperial Palace against an Orc siege of unprecedented scale. Once again, the numbers favored the Orcs overwhelmingly. Once again, the Custodians prevailed, though the cost was higher than at Gyros Thravian. The exact casualty figures from that battle have been lost to time and secrecy, but Imperial records speak of entire shield companies that had to be reconstituted after the war. This tells us something important. While Custodians are incredibly effective against Orcs, they are not invincible. Sufficient numbers, properly applied, can overwhelm even the Emperor's finest. The key word there is sufficient. Or we're not talking about outnumbering them 2 to 1 or even 10 to 1. We're talking about the kind of numerical superiority that the Orcs can achieve when a truly massive gathering occurs. When tens or even hundreds of thousands of greenskins assault a position held by a few hundred Custodians. There's another factor to consider, one that doesn't appear in the official records, but that any veteran of combat against Orcs understands instinctively. The psychic field that Orcs generate grows stronger with their numbers. 1,000 Orcs generate a field of certain power.
You know, I have to pause here for a moment because writing about this battle really puts things in perspective for me. I've been covering Warhammer lore for quite a while, and every time I dive into Custodian combat, I'm genuinely in awe. Like, we throw around these numbers casually, one custodian killing hundreds of orcs, but think about what that actually means on a personal level. These aren't video games characters in the lore. These are individuals who have trained for centuries, who remember battles we can barely imagine, who carry the weight of 10,000 years of Imperial history. And here they are, fighting for 16 straight hours without food, water, or rest, watching their brothers fall, knowing each death is irreplaceable. That's the part that gets me every time. The orcs, though, they're having the time of their lives. And they're literally dying with smiles on their face because they got the fight they wanted. There's something almost tragic about that contrast. The custodians fighting out of duty and loss, while the orcs fight out of pure joy. It's what makes this universe so compelling to me. Neither side is wrong from their own perspective. They're just fundamentally incompatible ways of existing. Anyway, let me get back to the battle.
10,000 orcs generate a field 10 times stronger. And when you're facing hundreds of thousands of orcs, the reality-warping effects of their collective belief become significant enough that even custodians must account for them. Shots that should miss hit their mark. Weapons that should fail keep working. Orcs that should die keep fighting. The field doesn't make the orcs invincible, but it does make them significantly more dangerous. So what does all this historical precedent tell us about what happens when custodians face an entire orc army? It tells us that the custodians will kill orcs at a rate that seems impossible. It tells us that each custodian is worth dozens, potentially hundreds of orcs in combat. It tells us that the custodians will not break, will not flee, will hold their ground until victory or death. But it also tells us that if the orc army is large enough, if the numbers are truly overwhelming, if the psychic field is strong enough, the custodians can be brought down. Not easily, not cheaply, but they can be brought down. The mathematics of death, in this case, are brutally simple. A custodian can kill 100 orcs, but what if there are 101? What if there are 200? What if there are 1,000 orcs for every custodian? At some point, even the finest warriors in the galaxy must acknowledge the cold arithmetic of attrition. At some point, even the custodians face the limits of what flesh and steel, however enhanced, can accomplish. But mathematics alone cannot tell the full story. Numbers on a casualty report cannot convey the reality of what happens on the battlefield when these two forces collide. For that, we must turn our attention to the battle itself, to the moment when gold meets green, when the Guardian spears begin their deadly work, when the orcs charge forward with their characteristic roar, and the custodians meet them with silent, perfect violence. At the initial contact, when gold meets green, the moment before first contact is always the same. No matter the battle, no matter the forces involved, there is a pause, a breath held, a final instant of stillness before the storm breaks. But the anticipation is different for each side. The custodians stand in their formation, if formation is even the right word, for the loose arrangements they prefer. Each warrior separated from his brothers by a dozen meters or more, each one a self-contained army waiting to be unleashed. They have checked their weapons, tested their armor systems, reviewed the tactical situation. They know exactly how many enemies they face. They have calculated the optimal firing patterns, the most effective engagement zones, the best positions for a fighting withdrawal if it becomes necessary. But calculation is not fear. A custodian does not fear the coming battle. Fear is an emotion for those who are uncertain of the outcome, who question their ability to prevail. A custodian has no such uncertainty. He has faced worse odds before. He has killed greater enemies. He has endured for centuries, perhaps millennia, and he will endure through this battle as well. His heart beats steady. His breathing remains calm. His thoughts are crystal clear. He is ready. The orcs, on the other hand, are anything but calm. They surge forward in a great mass, bellowing their war cries, firing their weapons wildly into the air, or at distant targets they have no hope of hitting. They trip over each other in their eagerness to reach the enemy. They shove and elbow their way forward, each one trying to be the first to get stuck in. ere to claim the first kill, to prove they're the biggest and best. They're Nob's raw orders that are mostly ignored. Their war boss, a massive brute standing head and shoulders above his followers, waves his power claw and urges them forward with promises of violence and glory. This is not discipline in any sense that an Imperial Guard officer would recognize. This is barely controlled chaos. But it is the Orc way, and it has served them well across 10,000 years of warfare. Because while they may seem disorganized, while they may appear to be nothing more than a mindless mob, there is a terrible purpose to their advance. They are a tsunami of green flesh and crude metal, a force of nature that simply cannot be stopped by conventional means. The distance closes, 500 meters, 400, 300. The Custodians still have not moved, have not fired a shot. They stand like golden statues, unmoving, unshakable. To an outside observer, it might seem like they are frozen, perhaps overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what they face. But inside their helmets, behind their eye lenses, their enhanced brains are working at speeds that would shame the most advanced cogitators. They are tracking thousands of targets simultaneously, calculating trajectories, assessing threats, identifying priority targets. They are watching for the war boss, for the Nobs, for any orcs carrying heavy weapons or showing signs of enhanced size and strength. 200 meters, 150. The orcs are firing now, a storm of bullets and rockets streaking toward the Custodian lines. Most of these shots go wide, orc marksmanship being what it is. Those that might hit home are deflected by the Custodians' armor or their storm shields, the auramite plates turning aside crude bullets with contemptuous ease. Still, the Custodians do not return fire. They are waiting, conserving their ammunition for when it will do the most good, when they can be certain that every shot will kill. 100 meters, 75. The orcs are close now, close enough that the Custodians can see the details of their ugly faces, the scars and crude glyphs marked into their green skin, the savage glee in their beady red eyes. Close enough to smell them, a stench of sweat and fungus and exhaust fumes that would make a lesser warrior gag. Close enough that the ground trembles with the thunder of their boots, thousands upon thousands of heavy feet pounding the earth in a chaotic rhythm. And then, as at 50 meters, the Custodians open fire. The sound is like the wrath of the Emperor made audible. Guardian spears blaze with bolt rounds, each shot placed with perfect precision, each shot a kill. Sentinel blades flash as their wielders trigger their integrated weapon systems. Adrastus bolt calivers pour streams of mass-reactive shells into the orc horde. In the span of 3 seconds, perhaps 500 orcs die, each one cut down by a perfectly placed shot to the head or center mass, their bodies crumpling to the ground or exploding in showers of green blood and gore. The orc charge doesn't stop. If anything, it accelerates. The orcs in the front ranks don't care that their comrades are dying. They don't even really notice. They are too focused on reaching the enemy, or on getting into melee range where their superior numbers will tell. Behind them, the mass of their fellows pushes them forward, an irresistible tide of green flesh that simply cannot be stopped by gunfire alone, no matter how accurate. 40 meters, 30. Another volley from the Custodians. Another 500 orcs dead. The ground between the two forces is carpeted with bodies now, a green carpet of the fallen, and still the orcs come. They leap over the corpses of their comrades without breaking stride. They use the bodies as cover to advance further. They don't even slow down. This is what makes orcs so terrifying as an enemy. They have no sense of self-preservation, no fear of death. Each one believes, truly believes, that they will be the one to reach the enemy and claim victory. 20 meters, 10. And the Custodians fire one last volley, and then they shift seamlessly into melee combat. There is no awkward transition, no fumbling with weapons or adjusting stances. One moment they are firing, the next, their guardian spears are spinning in lethal arcs. Their power blades are glowing with deadly energy. Their movements are flowing from defensive postures into aggressive attacks with the grace of master dancers. The first orcs to reach the custodian lines die instantly. A guardian spear takes one in the throat, nearly decapitating him. A sentinel blade splits another from shoulder to hip. A power fist, wielded by a custodian in Alaris Terminator armor, crushes an orc's skull like an overripe fruit. The custodians move like liquid death, each one creating a sphere of destruction around themselves that no orc can penetrate and survive. But the orcs keep coming. For every one that dies, two more take its place. They swing their choppers wildly, their crude axes and swords bouncing off auramite armor or being deflected by perfectly timed blocks. They fire their shooters at point-blank range, the muzzle flashes creating a strobe light effect, most of the shots missing entirely or ricocheting off armor, but occasionally one finds a weak point, a joint, or a gap, and draws golden blood. This is the crucible. This is the moment that will determine the outcome of the entire battle. Because while the custodians are vastly superior warriors, while each one is killing orcs at a rate that would seem impossible to anyone who hasn't witnessed it firsthand, they are being surrounded. The orcs are flowing around them like water around stones, threatening to engulf them completely. A custodian can kill one orc every few seconds, but when there are 10 orcs attacking him from all sides simultaneously, when he's parrying blows from 3 different axes, while trying to counterattack a 4th orc and being shot at by a 5th, even his enhanced reflexes and centuries of training are tested to their limits. This is what the orcs don't understand in the moment, though some of their more cunning leaders will realize it later. They think they're winning because they're landing blows, because they're forcing the custodians to defend, because they can see golden armor being scratched and scored by their attacks. What they don't realize is that the custodians are trading space for time. They're giving ground slowly, deliberately, killing orcs with every step, maintaining their defensive perimeter even as it contracts. They're not running, they're not breaking, they're executing a tactical withdrawal that will concentrate their forces and make them even more difficult to overwhelm. A custodian shield captain makes a gesture, a simple movement of his hand that his brothers recognize instantly despite the chaos of combat. The custodians shift their formation, moving from their spread-out positions into something tighter, more cohesive. They're not abandoning their individualistic fighting style. Each one is still operating independently, but they're doing so in a way that allows them to support each other more effectively. An orc breaks through one custodian's guard, and before it can follow up, the custodian next to him has skewered it with his guardian spear. Another orc charges from behind, and a third custodian intercepts it, his sentinel blade taking off its head with casual precision. The orcs, seeing the custodians pulling back, seeing them giving ground, interpret this as victory. They roar with triumph. They press harder. They surge forward with renewed vigor. This is exactly what the custodians wanted. By allowing the orcs to believe they're winning, they're encouraging them to bunch up, to crowd together in their eagerness to claim the kill. And when orcs bunch up, when they're packed together so tightly that they can barely swing their weapons, that's when they're most vulnerable. The shield captain makes another gesture. Every custodian sees it, processes it, understands it in a fraction of a second. They shift stances, moving from Rendax, the defensive stance, to Dakatarai, the aggressive stance, designed for fighting multiple opponents. And then they counterattack. What happens next is butchery on a scale that defies description. The custodians explode outward, their weapons moving in patterns that are almost too fast to follow, each strike killing an orc, each movement flowing seamlessly into the next. They're not just attacking the orcs in front of them. They're attacking in all directions simultaneously, their enhanced reflexes and superhuman speed, allowing them to block an attack from behind while killing an orc to their left and lining up a shot at an orc to their right. It's like watching 100 wood chippers thrown into a pile of logs. Everywhere a custodian moves, orcs die. The orcs, who moments ago thought they were on the verge of victory, suddenly find themselves being cut down faster than they can process, as the psychic field that has been bolstering their courage and strength wavers. For just a moment, just a brief instant, some of the orcs in the back ranks hesitate. They see the golden warriors they thought they had surrounded suddenly cutting through their mob like it's made of paper. They see their strongest nobs being killed as easily as the smallest Gretchen. They see orcs dying by the dozen, by the hundred. And for just a moment, something that might be fear touches their simple minds. But only for a moment. Because the war boss, the massive brute who has been wading through the battle, crushing enemies with his power claw and roaring orders that are barely heard over the din of combat, sees what's happening. He sees his boys hesitating, and he will not tolerate that. He bellows a challenge that cuts through the battlefield noise like a klaxon, a sound that is part rage, part command, all violence. The orcs hear their boss, and their hesitation vanishes. They surge forward again, reinvigorated, their belief in their inevitable victory restored. The war boss begins moving toward the center of the battle, toward where the shield captain stands, directing his forces with gesture and example. He is moving toward a confrontation that will define the battle's outcome. Around him, the green tide and the golden spear continue their deadly dance, each side killing, each side dying, each side absolutely convinced that they will prevail. This is the grinding middle of the battle, the long hours where attrition becomes the deciding factor. This is where we see the true test of both forces. That's where the Custodians' skill meets the orcs' numbers in a contest that will be measured in blood and bodies. The grinding middle, a war of attrition hours pass. In the chaos of combat, time becomes meaningless, but the objective chronometers in the Custodians' helmets mark every second with pitiless precision. 2 hours since first contact. 3, 4. The sun, which was high overhead when the battle began, begins its descent toward the horizon, painting the battlefield in shades of red and gold that mirror the blood and armor covering the ground. The Custodians have been fighting without pause for these hours. They have not eaten, they have not drunk, they have not rested. Their enhanced physiology allows them to fight at peak efficiency far longer than any normal human, far longer even than space marines. But they are not infinite. Their bodies are producing lactic acid that even their enhanced metabolism struggles to process. Their ammunition reserves are depleting, each shot carefully conserved, but nevertheless counting down towards zero. Their armor, while incredibly durable, shows signs of damage, scratches and gouges, and the occasional deeper wound where an orc power claw managed to connect or a lucky shooter burst found a weak point. And yet they fight on, because this is what they were created for. This is their purpose, their calling, their duty. Each custodian is an army unto himself, and he will fulfill his function until the enemy is destroyed or he falls. There is no middle ground, no possibility of surrender or retreat beyond the tactical withdrawals they've been executing to maintain optimal fighting positions. Yet around each custodian lies a carpet of dead orcs, not metaphorically, but literally a carpet, bodies piled 3 or 4 deep in a rough circle, corresponding to the reach of their weapons. A single custodian has killed hundreds of orcs in these 4 hours. Some have killed more, those with heavier weapons or those who have been more heavily pressed. The shield captain, still standing at the center of the formation, still directing his forces with gestures and vox communication, has personally killed nearly 1,000. His guardian spear never stops moving. Its power field never fades. Its bolter never runs dry because he is using bolt shells recovered from fallen enemies, loading them directly into his weapon's magazine with motions so practiced they're almost automatic. But for every orc killed, more are coming. But the orc army is vast beyond easy counting. The Custodians' initial estimates suggested perhaps 50,000 orcs in the horde. That estimate has been revised upward repeatedly as the battle progresses. 70,000, 90,000. Current estimates place the orc forces at well over 100,000, and still more are arriving, drawn by the sound of battle, by the psychic resonance of the combat, by the simple orc instinct that when there's a good fight happening, you run toward it, not away from it. The Custodians are killing orcs at a rate of approximately 100 per minute across their entire force. At any given moment, multiple Custodians are each killing an orc every few seconds. This is a staggering casualty rate, numbers that would break any normal army. The orcs have lost tens of thousands of warriors in these hours. If this were any other enemy, if this were Imperial Guard, or Eldar, or even Chaos Space Marines, the battle would be over. The enemy would have broken, would have routed, would have retreated in the face of such horrific casualties. But the orcs are not breaking. They are not rooting. If anything, they are fighting harder now than they were at the start of the battle, because the psychic field they generate grows stronger with the intensity of the combat. The longer the battle rages, the more powerful that field becomes. Orcs who should be dead keep fighting, kept on their feet by nothing but belief and the Gestalt psychic energy. Orcs who should misland their blows with improbable accuracy. Orc weapons that should have jammed or exploded keep firing, keep killing, are kept functional by the collective will of the greenskins. And this is where the mathematics start to shift in troubling ways for the Custodians. Yes, they are killing orcs at an incredible rate. Yes, each Custodian is worth hundreds of enemies in combat, but they are not infinite. They cannot kill an unlimited number of orcs. Eventually, their ammunition will run out. Eventually, their armor will fail in a critical location. Eventually, a power claw will connect with full force, or a rocket will strike true, or a knob will land a lucky blow with a massive chopper. The first Custodian falls at the 3-hour mark. He is a veteran of 2,000 years, a warrior who has stood in the presence of the Emperor himself, who has killed demons and traitors and Xenos beyond counting. And he is brought down not by a single mighty blow, but by attrition. A shooter burst finds the already damaged seal on his knee joint, and hydraulic fluid begins leaking. His mobility decreases by perhaps 10%. It is a minor wound, barely worth noting under normal circumstances. But these are not normal circumstances. With his mobility slightly compromised, he cannot dodge quite as effectively. An orc chopper that he would normally have sidestepped instead glances off his pauldron, leaving a deep gouge. Another orc capitalizes on this, its crude axe finding the gap between his chest plate and his arm, drawing blood. The Custodian kills both orcs in response, his guardian spear moving in a figure 8 pattern that ends both of their lives before they can celebrate their hits. But more orcs are coming. They sense weakness, smell blood, and they press harder against this one warrior. He kills them as they come, his movements still precise, still efficient, but he is surrounded now, truly surrounded, unable to withdraw because there are orcs behind him, and to both sides and in front. He fights like a god of war, like a demigod made manifest, killing 3 orcs, then 4, then 5 more. And then a knob breaks through, a massive brute wielding a power claw that is nearly as large as the Custodian himself. The Custodian sees the threat, brings his guardian spear up to block, but his damaged knee slows him by a crucial fraction of a second. The power claw catches his spear and tears it from his grasp. Before he can draw his misericordia, the claw closes around his torso. The power claw squeezes. Auramite armor, the finest protection humanity has ever produced. He buckles and cracks. The Custodian's enhanced skeleton, bones reinforced beyond the strength of steel, breaks. His twin hearts are crushed. But even in death, even as his life fades, he is not finished. With his last strength, he triggers the detonator on his belt. His armor's power core overloads, and the explosion takes the knob and a dozen other orcs with him. His brothers register his death via the Vox network. They do not mourn. Not yet. There will be time for mourning when the battle is done, if they survive. Instead, they adjust their positions to cover the gap his death created. They fight harder, kill faster, compensate for the loss of their brother through increased aggression and lethality. And they engrave his name in their memories, swearing that he will be avenged before this day is done. The battle continues. The sun touches the horizon, and still the fighting rages. The orcs are tiring now, even with their enhanced stamina and the psychic field bolstering them. They have been fighting as long as the Custodians, and while they are tough, they are not as tough as warriors forged by the Emperor himself. Individual orcs are slowing, their swings becoming sluggish, their charges less enthusiastic. But there are still so many of them. Still tens of thousands of green bodies pressing forward, climbing over the corpses of their fallen comrades, driven by their love of battle and their simple belief that if they just keep fighting, they will eventually win. The Custodians, meanwhile, have shifted tactics. They have abandoned their individual fighting positions and formed into a proper shield wall. Something they rarely do, but which the situation now demands. Those with Presidium shields have moved to the front, creating an overlapping barrier of auramite and ceramite. Behind them, Custodians with Guardian spears provide supporting fire and thrust forward with their weapons when orcs get too close. It is a more defensive posture than they prefer, but it is necessary. They are no longer trying to maximize their kill count. They are trying to survive until the orcs finally break or until reinforcements arrive. But reinforcements are not coming. The Custodians are alone, cut off from any support, facing an enemy that still outnumbers them by hundreds to one. This is not a tragedy. This is not an oversight. This is exactly the kind of situation that Custodians train for, the kind of impossible odds that they are expected to overcome. They do not need reinforcements. They need only to endure, to hold, to kill enough orcs that the green tide finally runs dry. The orc warboss, that massive brute who has been carving his way through the battle, finally reaches the Custodian shield wall. He is enormous, standing perhaps 9 feet tall, his muscles bulging beneath his green skin, his power claw stained with the blood of lesser enemies. He has been building toward this moment through the entire battle, killing smaller foes to work himself up into a proper fury, to prove to his boys and to himself that he is the biggest, the strongest, the best. He looks at the shield wall, at the golden warriors arrayed before him, and he roars a challenge that shakes the air itself. This is it. This is the moment he has been living for. This is where he proves that he is worthy of leading this great crusade, that he can overcome even the Emperor's finest warriors. He charges forward, his knobs following in his wake, and the true test begins. The shield captain steps forward to meet him. This is his duty, his responsibility as the leader of this force. He will not hide behind his warriors. He will not let others face this threat while he directs from safety. He is a Custodian, and Custodians lead from the front, always. He shifts his Guardian spear into a two-handed grip, settling into a stance that is a blend of 3 different martial katas, a personal style he has developed over 5,000 years of combat. The warboss swings his power claw in a devastating overhead arc. The shield captain doesn't try to block it, that would be suicide, as the force of that blow could shatter even his enhanced skeleton. Instead, he steps aside with inhuman speed, letting the claw crash into the ground where he was standing a fraction of a second before. The ground cracks, leaving a crater a meter across. If that blow had connected, if the Custodian had been even slightly slower, he would be dead. But he was not slower. He was faster. And now he is inside the warboss's guard, his Guardian spear thrusting forward toward the orc's throat. The warboss is fast too, faster than any orc has a right to be, and he jerks his head aside. The spear's power field still catches him, opening a gash across his shoulder that would have killed a lesser creature. The warboss doesn't even seem to notice. He backhands the Custodian with his free hand, and a blow that sends the warrior stumbling back despite weighing several hundred pounds in his armor. They circle each other, predator and predator, each recognizing in the other a worthy opponent. Around them, the battle continues, Custodians and orcs locked in mortal combat. But this fight, this duel, this is what will decide everything. If the shield captain falls, the Custodians will lose their coordination, their tactical edge. If the warboss falls, the orcs will lose the psychic focus that has been driving them forward. Their belief in victory will waver. They clash again. The power claw strikes toward the Custodian's head. The guardian spear stabs toward the warboss's chest. Both warriors move with speed that blurs their forms. The claw closes on empty air. The spear draws green blood. The warboss roars and charges forward, accepting a second wound to his side in order to get within grappling range. The custodian tries to backpedal, to maintain the distance that favors his spear, but an orc corpse catches his heel and he stumbles. The warboss sees his chance. The power claw descends toward the custodian's head, and this time there is nowhere to dodge. The custodian edge. Mastery in motion. But the shield captain does not dodge, because he doesn't need to. In the fraction of a second between the warboss's claw beginning its descent and the moment it would connect with his helmet, the custodian makes a choice. He could try to roll away, but he would leave himself vulnerable to follow-up attacks. He could try to block, but the force would drive him to the ground. Instead, he does something that requires absolute confidence in his abilities and his equipment. He activates his refractor field. The power claw hits what appears to be empty air above the custodian's head and is deflected by a shimmer of energy, the refractor field bending reality just enough to turn aside the blow. The warboss, expecting his claw to close on the custodian's skull, instead finds his momentum carrying him forward off balance. And the shield captain, still on the ground but far from helpless, brings his guardian's spear up in a rising thrust that catches the warboss under his chin. The power field of the spear slides through the orc's thick skull like it is paper. The blade erupts from the top of the warboss's head. For a moment, the massive orc stands perfectly still, his beady red eyes wide with surprise. Yet he has time to process what has happened, to understand that he has been killed by the golden warrior he thought he could crush. Then he falls, his massive body hitting the ground with a crash that can be heard even over the din of battle. The effect is immediate and devastating. The orcs who witness their boss fall stand frozen for a crucial second, their simple minds struggling to process what they just saw. Their boss, the biggest and strongest orc in the entire army, the warrior they thought was invincible, is dead, killed by a single golden warrior in a duel that lasted barely a minute. The psychic field that has been sustaining them wavers, stutters, threatens to collapse entirely. And the custodians, feeling the shift in the battle's momentum like a physical thing, press their advantage. The shield wall, which has been holding defensively, suddenly surges forward. Custodians who were conserving their ammunition open fire, their guardian spears blazing, cutting down orcs who are too stunned to fight back effectively. Every custodian shifts from their defensive stances to aggressive ones, becoming whirlwinds of golden death once more. This is the edge that the custodians possess, the advantage that no amount of orc numbers can truly overcome. It is not just their physical superiority, though that is certainly a factor. It is not just their superior equipment, though their auramite armor and master-crafted weapons are leagues beyond anything the orcs possess. It is their training, their experience, their ability to recognize and exploit key moments in battle. A space marine, for all his enhanced abilities and training, is still primarily a soldier. He follows orders, executes plans, functions as part of a larger military machine. A custodian is a tactician, a strategist, a warrior philosopher who can assess a battlefield and determine the optimal course of action in the span of a heartbeat. They saw the psychological impact of the warboss's death. They recognized that this was the moment to turn defense into offense, and they executed that transition with the smooth precision of a well-oiled machine. The orcs, their leadership eliminated, their psychic field weakened, begin to break. Not all of them, not immediately, but cracks appear in the green tide that were not there moments before. Some orcs in the rear ranks start backing away, their enthusiasm for the fight diminishing as they process the death of their leader. Others, and particularly the nobs who had been coordinating the attack, try to maintain order, bellowing commands and threatening their subordinates with violence if they don't keep fighting. But the custodians are relentless. Every orc that turns to flee is cut down before they can take more than a few steps. Every nob that tries to rally the warriors is prioritized as a target, killed with precision strikes that decapitate the orc command structure bit by bit. The shield captain, having recovered his footing, moves through the battlefield like an avenging angel, his guardian spear reaping a harvest of green lives with every sweep. This is what makes the Custodians so terrifyingly effective. They don't just kill enemies, they kill the right enemies at the right time. But they understand that eliminating a nob who is rallying other orcs is more valuable than killing 10 regular boys who are already fleeing. They understand that destroying an orc carrying a rocket launcher is more important than killing an orc with just a chopper. Every decision they make is calculated to maximize their effectiveness, to kill not just efficiently, but optimally. An orc painboy, one of the specialists who can patch up wounded orcs and get them back into the fight, tries to make his way to the rear of the orc formation where wounded warriors are gathered. He makes it perhaps 20 meters before a bolt round from a Custodian's guardian spear removes his head. The painboy dies, and with him dies the hope that the wounded orcs might be returned to combat. They will bleed out instead, and adding to the mounting casualties that are slowly but surely draining the orc army's strength. An orc mech, seeing the battle turning against his people, tries to activate a crude bomb he has been carrying, planning to martyr himself and take as many golden warriors with him as possible. He gets as far as pulling the detonator before a Custodian's shot strikes the bomb itself, causing it to explode prematurely. The mech and a dozen nearby orcs are consumed in the blast, and the Custodians, who were already moving away from that position because they had identified it as a threat, are untouched by the explosion. This is the other edge that the Custodians possess. Their enhanced senses and tactical awareness allow them to identify threats before those threats can fully materialize. Where a Space Marine might rely on his armor to survive a bomb blast, a Custodian would have already moved out of the blast radius, having identified the bomber through subtle cues, body language, the way the orc was moving, that registered to his enhanced brain as indicators of a threat. The battle is turning. The orcs are still fighting, they are still numerous, but they are no longer advancing. They are holding ground, then giving it up, slowly but surely being pushed back by the golden tide that is now pressing forward. The Custodians, sensing victory within their grasp, fight with renewed vigor. Their exhaustion is forgotten, pushed aside by combat stims that their armor automatically injects into their bloodstreams by sheer force of will, armed by the knowledge that they are on the verge of achieving something that seemed impossible just hours ago. A Custodian wielding an Adrastus bolt caliber takes a position on a small rise, using the elevation to maximize his field of fire. He begins systematically eliminating orcs at range, each shot perfectly placed, each shot a kill. In the span of 5 minutes, he personally kills nearly 200 orcs, his weapon never overheating despite the sustained fire, cooled by the sophisticated thermal management systems built into his armor. Orcs trying to charge up the hill to silence him are cut down before they can get halfway. Those trying to shoot him from range find their bullets bouncing off his armor or being absorbed by his energy field. Another Custodian, this one wielding a Castellan axe, has found himself surrounded by orc nobs, and the elite warriors who are tougher and meaner than regular boys. Where a lesser warrior would be overwhelmed, he instead shifts into the Dacaterai stance, the aggressive form designed for fighting multiple opponents. The axe becomes a blur of motion, its power field leaving trails of light in the air. Heads fly, arms are severed, bodies fall. In less than a minute, all 6 nobs are dead, and the Custodian moves on to his next targets without breaking stride. This is the ultimate expression of the Custodian fighting style. They do not just fight to survive, they fight to dominate, to impose their will on the battlefield, to demonstrate through violence and skill that they are the superior warriors. Every movement is economical, wasting no energy on flourishes or unnecessary actions. Every strike is lethal, are aimed at vital points that will kill or cripple in a single blow. Every position they take is tactically optimal, giving them the best possible advantage over their enemies. And yet, despite their mastery, despite their skill and equipment and enhanced physiology, they are not invincible. A second custodian falls during this phase of the battle, brought down not by a mighty blow, but by accumulated damage. His armor, which has been absorbing hits for hours, finally fails in a critical location. A chopper finds the weakened spot and drives through, the crude but effective blade finding the custodian's spine. He fights on for several more seconds, his enhanced biology keeping him alive and combat capable even with a mortal wound. But eventually, his strength fails. He falls among a mound of dead orcs, and having killed perhaps 1,500 of them in the battle, and his last act is to trigger his armor's self-destruct, ensuring that the orcs cannot loot his equipment. The shield captain registers the second loss, adjusts his tactical assessment, and continues the advance. They are winning. The cost has been high, 2 of his warriors dead, several more wounded to varying degrees, but they are winning. The orcs are breaking, their cohesion collapsing, their numbers finally thinning to the point where the custodians can see gaps in the green tide. But the battle is not over, because the orcs, for all their losses, for all the death and destruction that has been visited upon them, still number in the tens of thousands. And while they may be breaking, while their leadership may be dead, while their psychic field may be weakened, but they are not defeated. Not yet. They are still orcs, and orcs never truly surrender. They will fight on, even in defeat, even when victory is impossible, because fighting is what they exist to do. And this leads us to the orc response to what they are facing, to how the green tide adapts to the golden spear, to what happens when a species built for endless warfare encounters an enemy they cannot simply overwhelm through numbers alone. The orc response. Adaptation through chaos. One might think that the orcs, having lost their war boss, having seen their strongest warriors cut down, having suffered casualties that would break any organized military force, would simply rout. They would flee in disorder, each orc running for their life, the army dissolving into scattered mobs that the custodians could hunt down at their leisure. But that's not how orcs work. That's not how they've worked for millions of years, and it's not how they work now. Because while the war boss is dead, while many of the nobs have been eliminated, the orcs are not leaderless. A new hierarchy is already forming, emerging not through careful planning or orderly succession, but through the brutal simplicity of orc culture. The biggest and meanest orcs who are still alive start taking charge. They bellow orders. They bash the heads of orcs who aren't fighting hard enough. They drag the green tide back into something resembling cohesion through pure force of personality and muscle. One nob, a massive brute covered in scars and carrying a power claw nearly as large as the dead war bosses, starts rallying the orcs around him. He's not as smart as the war boss was, not as strong, but he's alive and he's fighting, and that's enough for orcs. He points his claw at the advancing custodians and roars a challenge that cuts through the din of battle. The message is simple, wordless, but every orc understands it. We're not done yet. And the orcs, hearing this, seeing that there is still someone willing to lead them, feeling the psychic field strengthen slightly as their collective will focuses on this new leader, stop retreating. They don't suddenly become organized. They don't form neat battle lines or execute complex tactical maneuvers. But they stop running. They turn to face the custodians once more, and they charge. This is the orc adaptation. It's not sophisticated. It's not elegant. It's not even particularly intelligent, but it's effective in a way that more civilized species struggle to understand. Yet the orcs adapt to defeat not by learning from their mistakes or changing their tactics, but by simply refusing to accept that they've been defeated. They see their comrades dying by the thousand, and their response is to fight harder. They see their leaders killed, and their response is to promote new leaders on the spot. They see their army falling apart, and their response is to hold it together through sheer bloody-minded determination. The new leader, the nob with the power claw, leads from the front in the way that only orcs can. He doesn't direct the battle from a safe position in the rear. He charges directly at the nearest custodian. his claw raised high, bellowing a war cry that's half rage and half joy. His fellow orcs, inspired by his bravery or perhaps just caught up in his wake, charge with him. The green tide, which moments ago was retreating in disorder, suddenly surges forward again. The Custodians are ready for this. They've been fighting orcs for millennia. They understand that even a broken orc army can have some fight left in it. But there's a difference between understanding something intellectually and experiencing it on the battlefield. The shield captain watches the orcs charging toward them again, watches them coming despite having lost half their numbers. And even he, with all his experience and tactical acumen, feels a moment of grudging respect for their tenacity. But respect does not stay his hand. His guardian spear lashes out, catching the charging knob in mid-stride. The power field slices through the orc's chest, and the knob falls. His brief moment of leadership ended before it truly began. Another orc, seeing this, immediately tries to take charge. This one survives slightly longer, perhaps 15 seconds, before a bolt round from another custodian removes his head. This pattern repeats itself across the battlefield. Orcs try to rally their fellows, to maintain the cohesion of the army, and the custodians systematically eliminate anyone who shows signs of leadership. It's a brutal but effective counter to the orc response. Without leaders, even temporary ones, the orcs cannot coordinate their attacks. They cannot focus their efforts. They simply charge forward individually or in small groups, and while each orc is still dangerous, they are far less effective than they would be if they were working together. But the orcs have another adaptation, one that is less obvious but equally important. They are learning in their own crude way, sour from the battle. They've seen that charging straight at the custodians in the open results in death before they can close to melee range. So they start using cover, hiding behind the corpses of their fallen comrades, advancing from crater to crater, using whatever terrain features they can find to mask their approach. This is not sophisticated tactics by any means. No orc is thinking, I shall use these rocks as cover while my comrades provide suppressing fire. But they are operating on instinct, the same instinct that has kept them alive through countless battles. And that instinct is telling them that standing in the open while the golden warriors shoot at them is a bad idea. One group of orcs, perhaps 20 strong, manages to get within charging distance of a custodian by using the terrain effectively. But they leap out from behind a pile of bodies and rush the warrior before he can bring his weapons to bear effectively. The custodian kills 6 of them before they reach him, kills 4 more in the first seconds of melee combat, but the remaining 10 are on him, surrounding him, attacking from all sides. The custodian shifts through 3 different stances in the span of 5 seconds, adapting to the changing threat. He kills 2 more orcs with precise thrusts of his guardian spear. A third dies when his backhand strike with the spear's haft crushes its skull. But he cannot engage all 10 simultaneously. An orc chopper finds the joint in his knee armor, the same vulnerability that doomed another custodian earlier. He stumbles. Another chopper strikes his backpack, damaging his armor's power supply. His movement slow, just slightly. But enough. This custodian's brothers see his peril and move to assist, but they are engaged with their own opponents. The orcs, sensing victory, press their attack with renewed ferocity. The custodian fights like a cornered lion, killing 3 more orcs in rapid succession, but there are still too many. A massive orc, bigger than the others, manages to grapple with him, wrapping its arms around the custodian's guardian spear and preventing him from using it effectively. The custodian responds by headbutting the orc with such force that his helmet cracks the orc's skull. But this leaves him vulnerable for a crucial moment. 2 choppers strike simultaneously, one catching him in the side, the other in the shoulder. His armor holds, but the impact drives him to one knee. Another orc leaps onto his back, trying to find a gap in his armor. But the custodian reaches back, grabs the orc by the throat and tears it off, crushing its windpipe. But more orcs are coming. Then a bolt round removes the head of the orc trying to grapple his spear. Another round kills an orc mid-leap. The wounded custodian's brothers have fought through their own opponents and are now providing covering fire. The surviving orcs, seeing their advantage evaporating, try to press their attack, but they are cut down before they can finish the wounded custodian. He He rises, testing his damaged leg, confirming that he can still fight despite his injuries. He retrieves his guardian spear, checks his ammunition count, 70 rounds remaining, and returns to the battle. He has been wounded, but he is not out of the fight. Not yet. This near kill demonstrates both the orc adaptation and its limitations. Yes, but the orcs managed to get close through clever use of terrain. Yes, they managed to wound a custodian through coordinated attack. But they failed to kill him, and that failure cost them 20 warriors. The exchange rate still heavily favors the custodians, but it's not as one-sided as it was at the start of the battle. The orcs have another advantage that becomes more apparent as the battle drags on. Their pain tolerance and physical resilience mean they can keep fighting with wounds that would incapacitate most other species. A custodian sees an orc he shot earlier, an orc that took a bolt round to the chest that should have killed it, still fighting. The explosive round detonated inside the orc's torso, destroying organs, probably puncturing a lung, but the orc is still on its feet, still swinging its chopper, still trying to kill. The custodian finishes the job with a second shot, this one to the head, ensuring the kill. But the incident is instructive. It tells him that he needs to be thorough, that wounded orcs cannot be assumed to be out of the fight. He adjusts his targeting priorities accordingly, taking the time to confirm kills rather than moving immediately to the next target. This adaptation by the custodian, this adjustment to his tactics mid-battle, is mirrored across the entire force. Every custodian is learning from what they observe, refining their approach, becoming more efficient killers of orcs with every passing minute. But the orcs are adapting too, in their own way. They're learning that frontal charges don't work. They're learning that the golden warriors can be wounded if you hit them in the right places. They're learning that working together, even in the crude orc fashion, is more effective than fighting alone. The battle has become a test of adaptability as much as a test of strength. The custodians, with their superior intelligence and tactical training, can adapt faster and more effectively. But the orcs, with their numerical advantage and their physical resilience, can afford to make mistakes. They can afford to lose 100 warriors, learning a lesson that will allow the next 100 to fight more effectively. The sun has set now, and the battle continues into the night. The custodians' armor provides them with perfect vision in the darkness, their enhanced eyes and helmet sensors rendering the battlefield as clear as day. The orcs have no such advantage, but they barely need it. They fight by sound and smell as much as sight, and the darkness does little to hinder them. If anything, it might give them a slight advantage, making it harder for the custodians to identify the most dangerous targets at range. But the custodians adapt to this as well. They switch their guardian spear's bolters to using tracers, rounds that leave luminous trails in the air. This allows them to track their shots more easily in the darkness, but it also serves another purpose. The tracers frighten the orcs. These streaks of light cutting through the darkness, each one ending in a green-skinned death. It's psychological warfare, using the orcs' primitive instincts against them. And it works. The orc attacks become more hesitant, more cautious. They're still fighting. They're still trying to overwhelm the golden warriors. But there's a new wariness in their approach. They've gone from absolute confidence in their inevitable victory to a dawning realization that they might actually lose this battle. That the golden warriors might actually kill all of them. But even this realization doesn't make them flee, because that's not how orcs are built. They will fight until they can't fight anymore, until they're all dead, or the enemy is defeated. There is no middle ground, no possibility of negotiated peace or honorable surrender. The orcs will fight, and the custodians will fight, and one side will win and the other will die. We're approaching the climax of this battle now, the moment when the outcome will be finally, irrevocably decided. The critical moments that will determine whether the golden spear prevails, or whether the green tide finally manages to drown even the emperor's finest. At critical moments, the razor's edge. 10 hours into the battle, both sides have been pushed to their limits. The custodians, for all their enhanced physiology and superior equipment, are showing signs of strain. Their movements, while still precise, lack some of the fluid grace they displayed at the start. Their reaction times, while still superhuman, have slowed by precious milliseconds. Their ammunition reserves are critically low, with many custodians down to a dozen rounds or less. 3 more of their number have fallen, bringing the total casualties to 5 out of the original force. The orcs have suffered far, far worse. Of the 100,000 or more that began the battle, fewer than 20,000 remain combat effective. The battlefield is a carpet of green bodies, but corpses piled so high in some places that they form macabre hills that warriors from both sides must climb over to continue fighting. The surviving orcs are exhausted, wounded, their crude weapons chipped and damaged from hours of use. Their psychic field, while still present, has weakened considerably, no longer providing the reality-warping power it had earlier. And yet, the battle continues. Neither side will break. Neither side will yield. This is now a matter of pure attrition, a race to see which army will be completely eliminated first. The mathematics are simple and brutal. The Custodians can kill approximately 1,000 orcs per hour at their current rate. They have perhaps 15 or 20 hours of combat capability remaining before exhaustion and ammunition depletion render them unable to continue fighting effectively, whilst the orcs have perhaps 20,000 warriors left. The numbers suggest that the Custodians will prevail, but barely, and only if nothing goes wrong. Something goes wrong. An orc carrying a crude explosive, a bomb cobbled together from scrap and faith, manages to get close to 3 Custodians who are fighting back-to-back against a Lorc mob. The bomb carrier is killed before he can trigger his device, but a stray shot from an orc shooter strikes the explosive, detonating it prematurely. The blast is massive, far larger than the Custodians anticipated, and all 3 warriors are caught in the explosion. 2 of them survive. Their armor is damaged, their energy shields are overloaded, and they're both wounded, but they survive. The 3rd Custodian, caught directly in the blast, does not. His armor's integrity fails, as in the explosion kills him instantly. The loss is devastating, not just because it reduces their numbers, but because it demonstrates that the orcs can still inflict casualties even in their weakened state. That one lucky shot or one suicide attack can negate all the Custodians' skill and preparation. The shield captain processes this loss and makes a decision. They cannot continue fighting in their current dispersed formation. They need to consolidate, to mass their remaining strength in a way that will prevent another such disaster. He gives the order via Vox, and the Custodians begin a fighting withdrawal toward a more defensible position, a rocky outcropping that will give them elevation and protection on their flanks. The orcs, seeing the Golden Warriors moving, interpret this as a retreat. Their morale, which has been flagging, suddenly surges. They surge forward with renewed vigor, believing that they are finally on the verge of victory. This is exactly what the shield captain wanted. By appearing to retreat, by giving the orcs false hope, he is drawing them forward, concentrating them in a kill zone where his warriors can be most effective. The Custodians reach their chosen position and turn to face the pursuing orcs. What follows is a masterclass in defensive warfare. The rocky outcropping protects their flanks and rear, forcing the orcs to attack from a narrow front. The Custodians arrange themselves in a formation that maximizes their overlapping fields of fire, each warrior able to support his brothers with covering fire when needed. They are no longer fighting as individuals. They have become a cohesive unit, a golden wall of death that the orcs must break through if they hope to win. The orcs charge up the rocky slope, scrambling over boulders and loose stone, and the Custodians cut them down. Guardian spears blaze, each shot perfectly aimed, each shot a kill. Orcs who manage to reach the top of the outcropping find themselves facing the Custodians' melee weapons, and they die just as quickly. The slope becomes slick with green blood, and still the orcs come, climbing over the bodies of their fallen comrades, driven by their love of battle and their refusal to accept defeat. One of the surviving knobs, a huge brute with a mega armor suit and a pair of power claws, manages to reach the Custodian line. He crashes into their formation like a wrecking ball, his power claws tearing through auramite armor. his massive frame allowing him to physically push Custodians aside. He kills one Custodian with a crushing blow that crumples the warrior's helmet. He wounds another, his claw finding the joint in the Custodian's hip and tearing through tendons and muscle. The shield captain engages him immediately. This is too great a threat to leave to his subordinates. The Nob and the captain circle each other, looking for openings. The Nob charges, his claws extended. The captain sidesteps, his guardian spear striking the Nob's side, but the mega armor absorbs the blow. The Nob swings both claws in a scissoring motion that would bisect the captain if it connected. The captain ducks under the attack and thrusts upward, his spear's power field finding the gap under the Nob's arm, penetrating the armor and finding flesh. The Nob roars in pain and rage. As he grabs the guardian's spear with one claw, trying to wrench it from the captain's grasp. The captain triggers the bolter function of his spear, firing 3 rounds directly into the Nob's torso at point-blank range. The explosive rounds detonate inside the mega armor, destroying the Nob from within. He falls, and with him falls the last serious threat to the Custodian position. But the victory comes at a cost. The wounded Custodian, the one the Nob injured, cannot continue fighting effectively. His mobility is compromised, his strength diminished by blood loss. The shield captain makes the hard decision to pull him back, to have him serve as a reserve rather than risk his death. This reduces their effective combat strength by 1 more warrior, bringing the number of Custodians still in the fight down to a dangerously low level. Yet the orcs keep coming. They have lost any semblance of coordination now. They are simply charging forward individually or in small groups, throwing themselves at the Custodian position with suicidal determination. Many die before they even reach the slope. Those that do reach it are cut down on the approach. A very few make it to the top, only to be killed immediately by the waiting Custodians. And slowly, inexorably, the orc numbers dwindle. 20,000 becomes 15,000. 15,000 becomes 10,000. The shield captain monitors the situation carefully, watching the orc numbers decrease, calculating how much longer they can maintain this defensive position, how much ammunition remains, how much strength his warriors have left. 5,000 orcs remain, then 3,000, then 1,000. Yet the tide is turning definitively now. The orcs are losing, and even they can sense it. Their attacks become more desperate, more reckless. They're no longer fighting to win. They're fighting because it's what they do, because surrendering or fleeing is not in their nature. 500 orcs, 200. The sun is rising again, painting the battlefield in shades of red and gold that seem almost obscene, given the carnage below. The Custodians have been fighting for more than 16 hours now, and they can see the end approaching. Not all of them will survive to see it. Another Custodian falls to a lucky shot that finds a weak point in his armor, bringing the total casualties to 7. But the rest will endure. They will hold this position. They will kill the last of the orcs. 100 orcs remain, then 50, then 20. The shield captain allows himself a moment of satisfaction. They have done it. Against odds that would have broken any other force in the Imperium, they have prevailed. The cost has been high. 7 of his warriors dead, several more wounded, but they have achieved victory. The last orc standing is a small one, barely more than a grot, wielding a chopper that is comically oversized for his frame. He looks at the golden warriors arrayed before him, at the carpet of bodies that represents his entire army, and for a moment, something that might be intelligence flickers in his beady eyes. He understands that he is going to die. He understands that this battle is over, and then he charges. Because he is an orc, and orcs don't surrender, he makes it perhaps 3 meters before a bolt round ends his life. As the last casualty of a battle that has claimed over 100,000 lives. The shield captain surveys the battlefield. The silence is almost deafening after the hours of continuous combat. The only sounds are the wind whistling through the rocks, the occasional crackle of cooling power fields, the labored breathing of his surviving warriors. They have won. But as he looks at the bodies of his fallen brothers, at the wounds his surviving warriors bear, at the sea of green corpses that stretches to the horizon. He wonders at what cost. The cost of victory. A Pyrrhic triumph. The battle is over. The orcs are dead. Every last one of them, their bodies littering the battlefield in numbers that defy easy counting. The custodians stand among the carnage, golden statues rendered in blood and gore. I'm the survivors of a battle that will be recorded in the annals of the Imperium as a great victory. But as any veteran knows, victory and triumph are not always the same thing. 7 custodians lie dead among the orc corpses. 7 warriors, each one a masterwork of genetic engineering. Each one irreplaceable. Each one worth more to the Imperium than entire regiments of Imperial Guard. Their names will be engraved on the walls of the Imperial Palace, their deeds remembered for millennia, but that is small comfort to the survivors who must now face the reality of what has been lost. The shield captain removes his helmet, allowing the morning air to touch his face for the first time in over 16 hours. His features are unmarked, the custodian augmentation process having given him an almost ageless appearance, but his eyes are ancient, carrying the weight of 5,000 years of combat. He has led forces into battle countless times, has seen warriors far more numerous than this perish, but the loss of even a single custodian weighs on him. Each death is not just the loss of a warrior, but the loss of centuries of experience, of knowledge, of martial skill that cannot easily be replaced. He looks at his surviving warriors. Some are wounded, their armor breached in places, blood seeping through the joints, despite their enhanced biology working to close the wounds. Others appear unharmed, their armor still gleaming. But the shield captain knows that appearances can be deceiving. They are all exhausted, pushed beyond limits that would kill any normal human, operating on nothing but enhanced physiology and sheer determination. They will need weeks to recover fully, weeks during which they will be unable to fulfill their duties to the Emperor. The tactical assessment is complete. Of the original 50 custodians who began this battle, 43 survive, 43 out of 50, an 86% survival rate. Any other Imperial force would celebrate such numbers as a miraculous deliverance. But the custodians are not any other force. Each loss represents a significant diminishment of the Imperium's defensive capability, a gap in the shield that protects the Emperor himself. Against this loss, the custodians have inflicted casualties that are almost incomprehensible. Conservative estimates place the orc dead at over 110,000. 110,000 orcs killed by 50 custodians. The mathematics speak to the incredible effectiveness of the Emperor's bodyguards, in each warrior worth thousands of the enemy. But mathematics cannot capture the full reality of what has transpired. The shield captain activates his Vox link, sending a coded signal to the fleet in orbit. The battle is over. They require extraction, medical support for the wounded, and recovery teams for the fallen. The response is immediate, dropships already burning through the atmosphere toward their position. The Imperial Navy had been monitoring the battle from orbit, watching through augers and picked captures as 50 golden warriors held against an army of greenskins. They had expected to be sending down recovery teams to collect bodies. The fact that they are instead extracting survivors is considered something of a miracle. While they wait for extraction, the custodians begin the grim task of recovering their fallen brothers. As each body is treated with reverent care, their armor carefully unsealed, their gene seed harvested and preserved. Unlike Space Marines, custodians do not implant gene seed into new recruits. The genetic material is not replicable in that way, but it contains knowledge, memories encoded at a cellular level, insights into the custodian's experiences that can be studied and learned from. The recovery of this material is not just practical, it is sacred, a final honor owed to the fallen. As they work, one of the custodians makes an observation that has troubling implications. The orc bodies are beginning to release spores. Even in death, Even with their entire army destroyed, the orcs are seeding this world for future infestation. Within years, perhaps decades, new orcs will emerge from the wilderness. Tribes of feral greenskins that will eventually become a threat to any human settlement on this world. The shield captain makes a note to recommend that this world be designated for exterminatus, or at minimum, intensive orbital bombardment to sterilize the areas where the battle took place. It is a harsh measure, but necessary. Allowing an orc infestation to take root would render all their sacrifices meaningless, would turn this victory into an eventual defeat as new orcs rose to challenge the Imperium. The dropships arrive, their engines kicking up dust and ash as they settle onto the battlefield. Medical personnel, tech priests, and support staff swarm out, moving to assist the Custodians. The tech priests begin immediate repairs on damaged armor, their mechadendrites working with practiced efficiency to seal breaches and restore power systems. Medical personnel, specially trained to work with Custodian physiology, attend to the wounded, administering stims, and beginning the process of knitting torn flesh. As the shield captain watches his warriors being tended to, he reflects on the battle. What have they proven here? That Custodians can overcome seemingly impossible odds. That was never in doubt. That each Custodian is worth thousands of enemies in combat. This too was known. What this battle has demonstrated, perhaps more clearly than any other engagement in recent memory, is that the Custodians are not infinite. They can be wounded. They can be killed. They can be overwhelmed if the numbers are sufficiently great. Well, this is a troubling realization for those who must plan the Imperium's defense. The Custodians are one of humanity's most powerful military assets, but they are also one of the most limited. There are only 10,000 of them in the entire galaxy, and creating new Custodians is a process that takes decades and requires resources and knowledge that are increasingly scarce. Every Custodian lost is a loss that cannot easily be made good, a weakening of the golden shield that protects Terra and the Emperor. The question that must be asked, then, is whether this battle was worth the cost. 7 Custodians dead in exchange for over 100,000 orcs killed. From a purely mathematical standpoint, it is an incredible exchange ratio. But warfare is not purely mathematical. Those 7 Custodians might have served for another 1,000 years or more. They might have prevented assassinations, thwarted chaos plots, or stood guard over the Emperor for entire millennia. Their deaths here, while glorious, represent a permanent loss to the Imperium. On the other hand, allowing 100,000 orcs to roam free would have been catastrophic. They would have consumed entire sectors, killed billions of Imperial citizens, disrupted trade routes and supply lines. The economic damage alone would have been incalculable. So in that sense, the trade was necessary and justified. Better to spend 7 Custodian lives than to allow that devastation to occur. But there is another cost that is harder to quantify. The Custodians who survived this battle are changed by it, but they have been pushed to their limits in ways that rarely happens. They have seen their brothers fall, felt their own mortality in a way that the Custodians, with their near immortality and incredible resilience, do not often experience. This may make them more cautious in future engagements, more aware of their limitations, or it may make them more determined, more driven to prove that they are worthy of the Emperor's trust. Only time will tell which effect dominates. For now, they must return to Terra, to the Imperial Palace, to stand their watch over the Golden Throne. They must heal, recover, and prepare for whatever challenges the galaxy will throw at them next. Because the orcs are not the only threat facing the Imperium. Chaos cults plot in the darkness. Tyranid hive fleets approach from beyond the galactic rim. The Necrons are awakening from their long slumber, and through it all, the Custodians must stand ready, the Emperor's shield against all threats. The extraction is complete. The dropships lift off, carrying the survivors and the bodies of the fallen back to the fleet in orbit. As they ascend through the atmosphere, the shield captain looks down at the battlefield below, at the sea of green bodies that marks where this engagement took place. It is a sight that will haunt him, not because he regrets the battle, but because he understands that this is just one of countless such battles occurring across the galaxy. The Imperium is besieged on all sides, and the Golden Shield, mighty though it is, can only be in so many places at once. The war continues. The Orcs will rise again, perhaps on this world, certainly on others, and the Custodians will fight them again, will face impossible odds and prevail through skill and determination, and the cost will continue to mount, slowly but surely depleting the ranks of the Emperor's finest until one day, there may not be enough Custodians left to hold back the tide. But that day is not today. Today, they have won. Today, the Golden Spear has proven superior to the Green Tide. Today, the Custodians have demonstrated why they are considered the finest warriors humanity has ever produced. And that, perhaps, is enough. Broader implications. Lessons in blood. The battle between 50 Custodians and an army of over 100,000 Orcs is not just a story of one engagement on one forgotten world. It is a case study in the nature of warfare in the 41st millennium, and a demonstration of the principles that govern combat when the most elite warriors face the most numerous foes. The implications of this battle reach far beyond the immediate tactical situation, informing Imperial strategy at the highest levels and providing lessons that will be studied for millennia to come. The first and most obvious lesson is one of quality versus quantity. The Custodians represent the absolute pinnacle of quality, each one a warrior without peer, equipped with the finest weapons and armor the Imperium can produce. The Orcs represent quantity taken to its logical extreme, a horde so vast that even their catastrophic casualties barely dent their overall strength. And what we see in this battle is that quality can prevail over quantity, but only up to a point. The Custodians killed over 2,000 Orcs each on average. This is an exchange ratio that would be considered impossible in most combat scenarios. It demonstrates the incredible force multiplier that superior training, equipment, and genetic enhancement can provide. A single Custodian is worth an entire regiment of lesser troops, perhaps an entire army in the right circumstances. This suggests that for the Imperium, the focus on creating and maintaining elite forces like the Custodians, the Space Marines, and other augmented warriors is strategically sound. But the losses suffered by the Custodians demonstrate the limits of this approach. 7 warriors dead out of 50 is a 14% casualty rate. For most Imperial forces, this would be considered light losses, barely worth mentioning in the post-battle reports. But for the Custodians, it represents a significant attrition that cannot easily be replaced. If this casualty rate were sustained across multiple engagements, the Custodians would be worn down to nothing within a few years. This suggests a strategic doctrine that the Imperium has already largely adopted. Elite forces like the Custodians should be deployed sparingly, used for critical missions where their unique capabilities are essential. They should not be wasted on battles that can be won by less valuable assets. The Orcs in this battle represented a threat significant enough to justify the deployment of Custodians. But there are many threats across the galaxy that should be handled by Imperial Guard, Space Marines, or other forces that are more easily replaced. The second lesson concerns the nature of the Orc threat specifically. The Orcs are often dismissed by Imperial planners as primitive savages, little better than animals, certainly not a threat comparable to Chaos or the Tyranids. This battle demonstrates how dangerous that dismissal can be. Yes, the Orcs are primitive. Yes, their tactics are crude. But their numbers, their physical resilience, and their psychic gestalt make them a threat that cannot be underestimated. An Orc army of sufficient size can overwhelm even the Custodians. If there had been 200,000 Orcs instead of 100,000, if the battle had lasted another 10 hours, the outcome might have been very different. The Imperium must maintain constant vigilance against Orc invasions, must be willing to commit significant resources to crushing Orc empires before they grow large enough to threaten entire sectors. Yet the War of the Beast nearly destroyed Terra. This battle demonstrates why that near disaster was possible. The third lesson is about the importance of leadership. The The third lesson is about the importance of leadership. The shield captain's tactical decisions were crucial to the Custodian victory. His choice to consolidate his forces at a defensible position, his targeting of Orc leaders to disrupt their command structure, his ability to inspire and coordinate his warriors even in the midst of chaotic combat. All of these factors contributed significantly to the outcome. Without effective leadership, even the most skilled warriors can be defeated by inferior but better coordinated opponents. This has implications for how the Imperium trains and deploys its commanders. The best weapons and soldiers in the galaxy are worthless if they are poorly led. The Custodians, with their individual autonomy and tactical flexibility, require leaders who can guide without micromanaging, who can set objectives and trust their subordinates to achieve them. This leadership model might not work for all Imperial forces, but it represents an ideal that other organizations could aspire to. The fourth lesson concerns the psychological dimension of warfare. The Custodians' appearance, their golden armor gleaming even in the midst of battle, served a purpose beyond mere aesthetics. It inspired fear in their enemies and confidence in any allies who might witness them. The psychological impact of seeing a Custodian cut through dozens of Orcs without breaking stride cannot be understated. It demoralizes enemies and makes them more likely to make mistakes, to hesitate, to break and run. Similarly, the Orcs' love of combat, their refusal to accept defeat, their willingness to fight on even when victory is impossible, these psychological factors made them far more dangerous than a more rational enemy might have been. A human army suffering such catastrophic casualties would have routed within the first hour. The Orcs fought for 16 hours despite losing over 90% of their forces. This psychological resilience is a weapon in its own right, and the Imperium must account for it when planning operations against greenskins. The fifth lesson is about logistics and sustainability. The Custodians were operating far from any support, without access to resupply or reinforcement. They had to win with the ammunition they carried, the equipment they wore, the strength in their enhanced bodies. This self-sufficiency is a tremendous advantage, allowing them to operate in situations where conventional forces would be impossible to maintain. But it also creates limitations. Once their ammunition is depleted, once their armor is breached beyond field repair, they become less effective. This suggests that for extended campaigns against numerous enemies, the Custodians require careful logistical support, despite their self-sufficiency. They need forward operating bases, supply dumps, repair facilities. The alternative is to deploy them only for short, decisive engagements where their initial loadout will be sufficient. Both approaches have their place in Imperial strategy, but the choice must be made deliberately based on the nature of the mission. The sixth lesson concerns the danger of Orc spores. Even in total defeat, even with every Orc on the battlefield killed, the greenskins succeeded in seeding the world for future infestation. This means that winning a battle against Orcs is not enough. The Imperium must be prepared to undertake long-term measures to prevent Orc resurgence. This might include orbital bombardment, bioweapons, or the establishment of permanent garrisons to hunt down any Orcs that emerge from spores. The failure to account for Orc spores has led to countless worlds being lost to greenskin invasions, decades or even centuries after the initial Orc force was destroyed. This battle serves as a reminder that when fighting Orcs, victory is not measured in battles won, but in worlds permanently secured against Orc infestation. The seventh and final lesson is perhaps the most philosophical. This battle demonstrates the fundamental nature of warfare in the 41st millennium. It is brutal, unforgiving, and eternal. There is no final victory, no decisive battle after which peace can reign. The Imperium fights not to win, but to survive another day, to hold back the darkness for another generation. The Custodians killed over 100,000 Orcs in this battle, but somewhere in the galaxy, 1 million more Orcs are being born, spreading from spores, gathering under new war bosses, preparing for new campaigns. This is the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war. The Custodians understand this better than most. They do not fight for glory or conquest. They fight because it is their duty, because the Emperor requires it, because the alternative is the death of humanity itself. and they will continue to fight, battle after battle, war after war, until either the Imperium prevails or the last custodian falls. But even in the face of such grimness, there is something to celebrate. The Custodians won this battle. They proved that humanity's finest warriors can prevail against impossible odds. They demonstrated that skill and determination and superior equipment can overcome numerical disadvantage. They showed that the Emperor's creation of the Custodians, his greatest work beyond the Primarchs themselves, was not in vain. For every imperial citizen living under the protection of the Imperium, for every world that sleeps safely, knowing that the Golden Guardians stand watch over terror, this battle is proof that their faith is not misplaced. The Imperium endures not because it is perfect, not because its warriors are invincible, but because warriors like these Custodians are willing to stand in the face of overwhelming odds and fight anyway. The broader strategic implications of this battle will be studied by Tactici Imperialis scholars for centuries. Simulations will be run, tactics analyzed, lessons extracted and codified into doctrine. The battle will become part of the training regimen for Imperial Guard officers, Space Marine sergeants, and Custodian recruits. It will be referenced in strategy meetings, cited in planning sessions, used as a benchmark against which other engagements are measured. But beyond the tactical and strategic lessons, beyond the cold analysis of kill ratios and casualty rates, this battle represents something more fundamental. It represents the clash between order and chaos, between civilization and barbarism, between the Imperium's vision of an ordered galaxy and the Orcs' vision of endless, glorious warfare. And in this clash, order prevailed. Barely, at great cost, but it prevailed nonetheless. That is the ultimate lesson of this battle. The Imperium can prevail. Not easily, not without sacrifice, but it can be done. And as long as warriors like the Custodians stand ready to make that sacrifice, as long as the Emperor's Guardians are willing to spend their lives in his service, the Imperium will endure. Conclusion: the eternal vigil. As our tale draws to its close, and as the last shots fade and the smoke clears over a battlefield carpeted in green corpses, we must take a moment to reflect on what we have witnessed. This was not merely a battle. It was a testament to the nature of warfare in the 41st millennium, a demonstration of what happens when humanity's finest face the galaxy's most numerous threat. The Custodians emerged victorious, as they have in countless engagements before this one, and as they will in countless engagements to come. But victory came at a price. 7 of the Emperor's finest warriors lie dead, their golden armor stained with their own blood. Their centuries of service ended in a brief moment of violence. These were not mere soldiers whose loss can be noted and then forgotten. These were legends, each one a hero in his own right, each one irreplaceable, and yet, replace them, the Imperium must. Even now, in the depths of the Imperial Palace, new aspirants are undergoing the agonizing transformation that will make them Custodians. It will take years, decades even, before they reach the level of skill and experience of those who fell in this battle. But they will reach it, because they must. The Imperium cannot afford to allow its golden shield to diminish beyond a certain point, not when threats press in from all sides. The Orcs, meanwhile, are already recovering from this defeat. On 1,000 worlds across the galaxy, new Orcs are emerging from spores. War bosses are rising to power, gathering their followers, preparing for new campaigns. The greenskins that died on this battlefield are already forgotten by their species, their deaths meaning nothing to the endless cycle of Orc warfare. Within years, the losses suffered here will be replaced. Within decades, the Orc threat will be as great as it ever was. This is the terrible mathematics of the Imperium's eternal war. The Custodians can win individual battles, can kill enemies at rates that defy belief, but they cannot win the war. There is no final victory against the Orcs, no decisive blow that will end the threat they represent. The best the Imperium can hope for is to contain them, to prevent them from gathering in sufficient numbers to threaten critical worlds, to kill them faster than they can reproduce. And this is what the Custodians, and all of the Imperium's warriors, must accept. They fight not to win, but to endure. They fight not for glory, but for survival. They fight because the alternative is the extinction of humanity, the end of the Imperium. It's the death of everything the Emperor built over 10,000 years of sacrifice and struggle. When a Custodian stands on the walls of the Imperial Palace, when he gazes out over the endless sprawl of Terra's hive cities, when he thinks about the billions of humans depending on his protection, he understands why his duty matters. Every orc he kills is one that cannot threaten those billions. Every battle he wins is one more day that humanity survives. Every sacrifice he makes is meaningful, even if the war itself can never truly be won. This is the burden that the Custodians carry, the weight that rests on their golden shoulders. They must be perfect, always, because anything less could result in catastrophe. They must be ready to face impossible odds, because that is what they will face again and again. They must be willing to die, because death in service to the Emperor is the only fate that awaits them eventually. But in accepting this burden, in carrying this weight, the Custodians become something more than merely human. They become symbols, icons of everything that humanity can achieve when it strives for perfection. They become the Emperor's gift to his people, proof that he has not abandoned them, that he still protects them even as he sits immobile upon the golden throne. When Imperial citizens hear tales of the Custodians, when they learn of battles like this one where 50 golden warriors faced an army and prevailed, they find hope. They understand that no matter how dark the galaxy becomes, no matter how many threats press in from the void, there are still warriors standing between them and annihilation. Oh, the Golden Guardians have not abandoned their posts. The Emperor's vigil continues, and so the Custodians return to Terra, to the Imperial Palace, to their eternal watch. They will repair their armor, tend their wounds, honor their fallen brothers. They will review the battle, extract lessons, improve their tactics for next time, and then they will stand ready, waiting for the next threat, the next impossible mission, the next time when the Emperor requires his finest warriors to face overwhelming odds. Because that is what Custodians do. That is what they were created for. That is the duty they accepted when they were transformed from mortal children into the Emperor's Golden Guardians. They stand watch over humanity, now and forever, until either the Imperium falls or the last Custodian draws his final breath. This battle, this clash between gold and green, this moment when quality faced quantity and emerged victorious, is just one more entry in the endless chronicle of the Imperium's wars. But it is also something more. It is a reminder that humanity can prevail, that skill and courage and determination can overcome even the most overwhelming odds, that the Emperor's vision, his dream of a humanity protected by the finest warriors ever created, was not in vain. So remember this tale. Remember the Shield Captain and his 49 warriors standing against a green tide that would have drowned entire armies. Remember the 7 who fell, their names to be honored for all eternity. Remember the orcs who fought with savage joy until the very last one fell. Remember what this battle teaches us about warfare, about sacrifice, or about the nature of the eternal struggle in which the Imperium is engaged. And remember that somewhere, right now, Custodians are standing watch. They are ready for the next battle, the next threat, the next time when humanity needs its finest warriors to hold back the darkness. They are the golden shield that protects us all, and they will never falter, never fail, never abandon their duty. That is what happens when Custodians face an entire orc army. They fight, they endure, they prevail, and they stand ready to do it all again, as many times as necessary, until the Emperor himself releases them from their eternal vigil. If you've enjoyed this deep exploration into the clash between the Emperor's finest and the galaxy's greenest menace, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to explore in the grim darkness of the far future, and I'll be here to guide you through it all. Until next time, May the Emperor protect you, and may his golden guardians stand ever vigilant in your defense.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.